After my car accident, my parents refused to watch my 6-week-old. Your sister never has these emergencies. I canceled $486,000 from my hospital bed. Then Grandpa walked in and said, the morphine was doing something strange to the ceiling tiles. They kept breathing, just slightly, just enough to make me unsure if I was unconscious or not. I'd look away and look back and they'd be still. I'd blink and they'd ripple. My right arm was in a cast from wrist to elbow. There were 2 tubes running out of my left side that I'd already been told not to touch, and I was trying very hard not to think about what they were draining. 3 ribs, a punctured lung, a compression fracture in the T6 vertebra they'd caught almost by accident on the second scan. I was 34 years old. My daughter was 6 weeks old, and my mother had just told me no, not I can't, sweetheart. The kind of no that at least has the decency to sound like an apology. This was the other kind, the slow, theatrical, practiced kind. The sigh before the sentence that told you she'd considered her answer long before you finished asking. I remember the exact moment I stopped waiting to be saved and started making decisions. It was 11:43 p.m. on a Wednesday. I know because I checked my phone when the nurse stepped out, and the time was the first completely clear thing I'd seen since they'd wheeled me out of the OR. I lay in that bed with a collapsed lung and a broken arm and a 6-week-old daughter 20 miles away with no one watching her, and I remember thinking, okay, fine, I'll do it myself. That thought, right there, was not new. I'd been thinking it most of my life. Before I tell you what happened in that room, I need to back up, because none of this makes sense unless you understand who I come from. My name is Paige. I grew up in a medium-sized house in Lakewood, Colorado, the older of 2 daughters. My parents, Linda and Gary, weren't monsters. I want to say that clearly because this story is going to make them sound monstrous, and the truth is more complicated and somehow worse than that. They were people who loved the idea of their children more than the actual children who showed up. They had a very specific idea of what a daughter was supposed to do, and when I failed to perfectly match that idea, they recalibrated their love accordingly. My sister Megan is 4 years younger. Megan is what happens when a family's emotional resources all flow in one direction for 30 years. She's not evil. She's just never had to develop the muscles you develop when no one's coming to save you. She got the cushioning. She got the soft landing. She got the benefit of every doubt my parents ever had to give. I got the tuition loans they co-signed and then let go to collections without telling me. I got the wedding they declined to attend because, and I am quoting my mother's voicemail directly, we're not sure this is the right choice for you. The right choice for me was Daniel, who is a structural engineer from Indianapolis, who is the most decent man I have ever met, and who has never once in 6 years of marriage given my parents a single legitimate reason to dislike him. They disliked him anyway, because he came from a family with different politics and a different church, and because I chose him over an argument they decided to start. After the wedding, Daniel and I made a decision. We would not freeze them out. We would leave the door open. We would be the bigger people indefinitely for as long as it took. Daniel believed, and I'd almost convinced myself, that a grandchild would change things, that Nora would be the thing that finally made the math work out differently. And in the meantime, I did what I'd been doing since I was 22 years old, and my mother called me crying about the mortgage. I sent the checks. Every first of the month for 9 years, 4 recurring transfers went out of our joint account like clockwork. My parents' general support, $2,000. Their mortgage shortfall, $100. My father's mounting medical expenses. He has type 2 diabetes and 2 stents and a knee that's been a problem since 2019, $900. And Megan's monthly stabilization fund, which is what my mother called it when she asked me to set it up back when Megan was between jobs, $500. The total was $4,500 a month for 9 years. I had never sat down and added it up in a single number. I think I understood, somewhere in the back of my brain, what the total would be, and I understood that if I said it out loud, it would require me to make a decision I wasn't ready to make. So I kept the 4 numbers separate in my head and kept the transfers running and told myself it was just family. Family takes care of family. That's what they'd always said. That's what they said when they needed something. The phrase conveniently disappeared when the need ran the other direction. The accident happened on a Tuesday in February at 6:17 p.m. I was 3 blocks from home. I'd just picked up dinner from the Thai place on Colfax. Green curry, pad see ew, spring rolls we didn't need but Daniel always wanted. Nora was home with Daniel. It was the first time I'd left the house without her since she was born, and I remember the specific lightness of sitting in the car alone, just me and the smell of lemongrass, some forgettable pop song on the radio. The truck ran the light on the cross street. F-250, crew cab, loaded. The driver told investigators he hadn't slept in 22 hours. He was cited for reckless driving and failure to yield. Those are his problems. Mine were the airbag going off in my face, the car spinning 90 degrees, and the sound, which I can only describe as the sound of something structural giving up. They cut me out of the car. I was conscious the whole time, which sounds like a good thing and wasn't. I remember a paramedic named Tomas putting his hand on my shoulder and saying, "Stay with me," in exactly the calm voice that tells you the situation is serious. I remember the hospital ceiling coming at me in sections as they wheeled me in. I remember a surgical resident named Dr. Ananya Kapoor, 2nd year St. Anthony Hospital, who held my hand while they put me under and said, "We're going to take good care of you." And she did. When I came out of surgery, Daniel was on the phone in the corner of the room. I heard his voice before I could see him clearly. Soft, careful, the voice he uses when he's trying very hard to stay calm. I heard him say, "She needs someone there tonight, Mom." A pause. I know, another pause. I understand, but Paige is a longer pause. Mom, he hung up. He came over and sat next to the bed. He looked at my arm, at the tubes, back at my face. "She's at Black Hawk," he said. Black Hawk is a casino town about 45 minutes west of Denver, up in the mountains. My mother goes there the way other people go to church, twice a month, sometimes more. She and her friend Carol. The slot machines specifically specifically. She's told us about it cheerfully and often, as if it's a charming quirk. She said she can be there by 1, Daniel said. Maybe. Our daughter was 6 weeks old. It was 11 o'clock at night. What about Harold? Harold is my grandfather, my mother's father. 78 years old, still drives. Lives about 20 minutes from our house in the opposite direction from my parents. I called him first. Linda answered his phone, said he was already in bed and she didn't want to wake him. I processed this. My grandfather didn't know you called. I don't think so. No. I closed my eyes for a moment. The ceiling tiles were breathing again. I opened them. Call him directly. His cell. Daniel looked at me. I tried to try again. From the hospital number if you have to. Daniel stepped out. I reached for my phone with my left hand, the good one, and I called my mother. She answered on the third ring with the warm, distracted voice of someone who has had several cocktails and is nowhere near an emergency. Paige, honey, how are you feeling? Daniel says, I need you at the house tonight, Mom, to watch Nora. A pause. The sound of slot machines in the background. That distinctive mechanical chiming. Sweetheart, I told Daniel. We're up here and the roads at night. You know how the mountain roads. It's February. The roads are plowed. It's 45 minutes. Carol and I came up together, so I don't even have... Mom. I stopped. I could feel something in my chest, near the tubes, that I wasn't supposed to aggravate. I kept my voice level. I'm in the hospital. I have a punctured lung. I have 3 broken ribs. Nora is 6 weeks old. I need someone at the house tonight. The pause that followed lasted approximately 4 seconds. I counted them. Then the sigh. Long. Theatrical. The specific sigh that has preceded every guilt pivot of my adult life. Your sister never has these emergencies. I heard it. I processed it. I noted it. My sister is on a Caribbean cruise, Mom. I know, but she plans ahead. She doesn't put everyone in a crisis. A truck ran a red light. Silence. Mom, yes or no? Another pause. A sound in the background. Carol's voice, asking something I couldn't hear. Honey, I don't think I can tonight. I hung up, not out of rage, out of triage. I had a very short list of things that needed to happen in the next hour, and continuing that conversation was not on it. I want to tell you what I felt in that moment, and I want to be honest with you. It wasn't devastation. It wasn't even surprise. It was a very quiet, very final click, like a door closing, not a slam, a click. I had been waiting, in some part of myself I'd never fully examined, for the moment when it would be clear enough that even I couldn't rationalize it. When the thing they did would be undeniable enough, specific enough, documented enough that I couldn't explain it away. I hadn't known I was waiting for that moment until it arrived. I picked up my phone, left hand, 6 taps. I called Nightingale Home Care, the overnight agency Daniel and I had vetted 3 months before Nora was born. Because Daniel travels for work and I'm a planner, and planners vet overnight care agencies before they need them. I had a contact there, a coordinator named Brenda Marsh. I told Brenda the situation in 9 sentences. I know it was 9 because I counted while I was talking, trying to conserve breath. She had a nurse named Yvette Wallace, 14 years in pediatric home care, registered nurse, CPR certified, background checked, available within 30 minutes. 40 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A photo from Yvette. Nora, asleep in her bassinet, left fist curled against her cheek, the tiny chest rising and falling in the particular rhythm that means deep sleep. I stared at that photo for a long time. Good. Then I opened my banking app. The thing about keeping the 4 numbers separate in your head is that at some point someone shows you the sum. I had the banking app open. I could see the recurring transfers lined up like soldiers. I could see the dates going back. On a whim, the kind of whim you only have at midnight in a hospital bed on morphine, I clicked into the transaction history and scrolled. Then I made the app do the math. It took about 4 seconds. $486,000. $486,000. 9 years. 48 checks. Month after month after month. I looked at that number the way you look at a car accident you've already been in, with the strange flat clarity of someone for whom the disaster is no longer coming but already here. Then I noticed something in the line items. There's a transaction label I'd set up years ago called Dad Medical. It was the $900 a month for my father's prescriptions and copays and the occasional specialist visit. I knew those costs because my mother sent me the EOBs, or she used to in the first few years, but there was a separate entry in the history, not a recurring transfer, a one-time transfer 2 years ago. Loan M, $40,000. I stared at it. Loan M for Megan, filed under the Dad Medical category so that it would disappear into the column without standing out. $40,000 2 years ago, labeled as a loan to the initial that no one would ask about. I scrolled back through the history. Quick pause. If you want more stories like this in better quality, my Spotify's linked in the description. I found the EOBs my mother had sent me, still archived in my email, still showing my father's actual medical costs. In the 2 years since the $40,000 transfer, my father's medical costs had been completely covered by his Medicare Advantage plan. I did the math on that too. The $900 month I'd been sending for 2 years, $21,600, had not gone to my father's medical care. I sat with all of this for a moment. The ceiling tiles breathed. Then I opened the recurring transfers. 4 of them. Lined up. I canceled the first one. Recurring transfer canceled. I canceled the second one. Recurring transfer canceled. The third. Recurring transfer canceled. The fourth. Recurring transfer canceled. 4 taps. Maybe 20 seconds. 9 years stopped the way a faucet stops. I put the phone on my chest and looked at the ceiling until it stopped moving. The call came 11 days later, on the 1st of the month. I was home by then, discharged after 6 days, home with strict instructions about activity levels and a follow-up schedule that was going to dominate the next 3 months. Daniel had taken 2 weeks off. He was doing everything while I recovered. He never once made me feel like a burden for it. My mother called at 9:14 a.m. Her voice came through warm as fresh bread, the voice she uses when she's decided to pretend nothing is wrong. Honey, is there a mix-up with the bank? I had been waiting for this next call. No mix-up, Mom. A pause. The warmth dimmed slightly, like someone turning a dial. The transfers didn't come through. All 4 of them. We called the bank and they said they were canceled. They were. A longer pause. Paige, are you saying you canceled them? Intentionally? Yes. Then she cycled. I had expected her to cycle, and she did. Guilt first. The soft, wounded version, after everything we've done for you. Then confusion, performed carefully. I don't understand what we've done wrong. Then the pivot to my father's health, his heart, his knee, the medications that cost so much. Then the slower revelation of how much she relied on it, how things were arranged around it. She cycled back around to the weapon she always returned to. Softer this time, almost wounded. Your sister never has these emergencies. The 3rd time now. I know, Mom. I said it very quietly. I know she doesn't. Then I hung up. First time in 34 years I'd ended a call while she was still talking. I sat in the quiet of my living room for a while. Nora was asleep in her swing, making the small sucking sounds she makes between sleep cycles. Daniel was in the kitchen. I didn't cry. I don't know exactly what I felt. Lighter than I'd expected. Lighter than I thought I had the right to be. My Aunt Carol arrived next. She is my mother's younger sister. She has my mother's capacity for righteous certainty without my mother's talent for disguising it. Her text arrived the following afternoon. A full paragraph, tightly packed, the kind of message someone composes and then stares at and then sends anyway. Your grandmother would be ashamed of you. Your parents gave you everything and you walk away when times get hard. Family takes care of family, Paige. What kind of example are you setting for that baby girl? I read it twice. Then I went to my desk. I opened a new document and I typed 9 years of numbers, 12 rows, 1 for each month of each year. I formatted it as a clean table. Date, amount, category, running total. I printed it on 1 sheet of paper, both sides. It filled both sides. At the bottom, I added 2 lines. The Blackhawk withdrawals are hers. Ask her. Loan M, $40,000. Not Dad's surgery. Filed there so nobody would ask. I took a photo of the document. I sent it to Carol without any other text. 3 minutes later, Carol's typing bubble appeared in our thread. It appeared and disappeared. Appeared and disappeared. Then nothing. No reply came. The invitation arrived the following Sunday. My mother called it a welcome dinner for baby Nora. She sent it through my grandmother's old Facebook account, which no one had taken down after Grandma Ruth passed 2 years ago. There was something appropriately disturbing about receiving a party invitation from my dead grandmother's profile picture, but I noted it and moved on. The dinner was at my Aunt Carol's house. 12 family members on the guest list. A Sunday afternoon. My mother had curated the audience carefully. Cousins who didn't know the details, a great uncle who still sent birthday cards to everyone, people who had a particular weakness for family harmony that my mother had always known how to exploit. I understood what it was. Get me in a room. Surround me with relatives. Apply enough ambient pressure that the path of least resistance becomes writing the check and calling it reconciliation. I texted 2 words. Will come. Then I called my grandfather. Harold Weston is 78 years old. He was a civil engineer for 40 years. He has a precise, patient way of speaking that makes you feel like every word he says has been load tested before deployment. After my grandmother Ruth died, my mother moved to manage his affairs, his calendar, his doctor appointments, the way information reached him. She did this, I had come to understand, because Harold's name is on things. The parcel that my parents' house sits on, several of my grandmother Ruth's accounts that passed through the estate. The night of my accident, my grandfather hadn't known I was in the hospital until he was already driving. My mother had called it a fender bender. He'd called Daniel's number and gotten voicemail. He'd called mine and gotten the surgical hold recording. He'd called 3 hospitals before he found the right one. When he finally arriving at 2:47 a.m., which I remember because a nurse had just noted the time on a chart, he walked in and sat next to my bed and held my good hand for a long time without speaking. She told you it was a fender bender, I said eventually. She did. Were you going to call the hospitals anyway? He thought about this. I would have by morning. He had driven past 3 exits before his gut told him something was wrong. I called him now, on a Tuesday afternoon, and told him what I was planning to do at Sunday's dinner. I told him about the spreadsheet, about the $486,000, about loan M, $40,000. Silence on the line for a moment. Then, how much of that do you want on the table Sunday? All of it. Another pause. Paige, his voice was careful. I've been carrying a folder for about a year. I didn't know if I'd ever need to open it in front of people. I looked at Nora, asleep in the crook of my good arm. Bring the folder, Harold. You want it quiet or you want it true? True? Then I'll bring the folder. Sunday dinner at Carol's house smelled like pot roast and good intentions and impending ambush. My mother opened with tears. Not subtle ones. Full performance, already running before I'd finished setting the diaper bag down. She swept into the room with her hands pressed together and her voice pitched to carry to every corner, and she addressed the assembled relatives as if she were opening for a jury. This has been the hardest week of my life. My daughter nearly died and I was out of my mind with worry. I barely slept. She pressed a hand to her chest. She turned toward me only briefly, enough to establish the stage picture, then turned back to the room. The relatives responded the way relatives always respond to a convincing performance, with quiet nods and concerned murmurs, and sidelong glances at me to see what I'd do. I did nothing. I sat down. Daniel sat next to me. Harold sat at the end of the table. He'd arrived first, I noticed, already in his chair, his cane against the table's edge, a manila folder sitting in front of him that no one had acknowledged yet. It was the kind of folder that gets soft at the corners when you've been carrying it a long time. The rubber bands holding it closed had gone pale and brittle. My mother worked the room for 20 minutes. She was precise about it. She visited each cluster of relatives. She cried at the right moments. She let Aunt Carol perform the supporting role of nodding at key beats. She told the story of my childhood with the specific editorial touch that made her the protagonist of it. She referenced my father's health 3 times. She mentioned Megan's cruise not as an alibi but as evidence evidence of Megan's character. Megan plans ahead. She's always been like that, even as a girl. Then she came to the center of the table. She had built to this. She had rehearsed this. She looked at me across the width of the table. I don't know where this cruelty comes from, she said. Her voice was precisely loud enough for all 12 people to hear. I've searched myself. I really have. Your father and I gave you everything we could. A pause. She tilted her head. Your sister never has these emergencies. The fourth time, in a full room, she handed me the gun and didn't know it. The table waited. I could feel it. Everyone holding slightly still, braced for the outburst, the crumble, the shouted thing that would frame me as the problem and make the performance she'd just given make sense. I reached into the diaper bag. Under the wipes, under the burp cloth, under the spare onesie. One folded piece of paper. I unfolded it slowly. I smoothed it flat with my left hand. Still my good hand. The cast on my right, a reminder of exactly why we were here. I set it on the table where the overhead light fell on it clearly. You're right, Mom, I said. I said it without irony, without venom. Megan never has these emergencies. I slid the paper to the center of the table. Here's why. The room went very still. $486,000. That's the total of 9 years of monthly transfers to this family. Of that, $65,000 went to Dad's documented medical care. I have the EOBs. $11,000 touched the mortgage. The other $410,000, I turned the paper slightly so the column totals faced the center of the room, most of it within 2 miles of Black Hawk, Colorado, and $40,000 of it went to Megan's company launch, filed under Dad's medical category so no one would know to ask. A sound moved through the room. Not a gasp exactly. More like the sound a room makes when everyone in it suddenly needs to breathe. My mother's face changed. The warmth dropped. The performance gave way. Not to grief, not to shame, but to the cold, cornered expression underneath, the one I'd seen exactly twice in my life. She reached for the last tool in the case. You twisted little, and that's when Harold's cane hit the table. Not violently. He placed it against the table's edge with a deliberate click, the way a judge places a gavel. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't stand. He simply set the folder in front of him and began working the brittle rubber bands off with the patient hands of a man who has waited a long time for the right room. I knew, he said. He wasn't talking to my mother. He was talking to the room. Ruth knew too. We didn't know the numbers. We knew the shape of it. He opened the folder. Inside, a thick stapled document on letterhead I could see from across the table. A Boulder law firm. Hendricks, Carr, and Ossie. Estate and trust law. I'd heard the name once years ago when Grandma Ruth was still alive and had mentioned updating her will. Harold drew out the document and set it in the center of the table, next to my spreadsheet. This house sits on our parcel, he said. It always has. Linda, your father put down the down payment, that's true. But the land itself, Ruth and I never transferred it. The accounts, the equity, the holdings, Ruth and I restructured everything into a revocable trust before she passed. Attorney named James Osei prepared it. It was notarized in October of 2022. He looked at my mother then, just looked at her. No cruelty, no triumph, the tired, final clarity of someone who has spent 2 years carrying a folder and is ready to put it down. It doesn't pass to Linda, he said. It passes to Paige, and to the baby. My mother's face did something I had never, in 34 years, seen it do. The mask simply fell off. Not the warmth going cold. Not the performance switching registers. The mask itself, the whole architecture of it, the controlled expressions and the practiced pivots and the theatrical size, just stopped, like a power cut. What was underneath was smaller than I expected. Just a woman at a table who had run out of moves. Aunt Carol said something. I didn't catch it. A cousin's chair scraped back. Someone at the far end of the table asked Harold a question that he answered quietly, without theatrics, pointing to a line in the document. I looked at Nora in her car seat beside me. She had slept through the whole thing, her fist against her cheek, exactly like the photo Yvette had sent me from my hospital room. Daniel put his hand on my arm, not to say anything, just to be there. Just to mark the moment with his presence, the same way he'd marked every moment for 6 years, quietly, solidly, without requiring applause. I looked at my mother one more time. She didn't look at me. She was looking at the document in Harold's hands, at the pages my grandfather turned with no particular hurry, at the notary seal in the bottom right corner of the trust page. I picked up the diaper bag. I stood up. We left before the pot roast came out 3 months later. Nora is sleeping in the next room. She has learned to make a specific sound when she's about to wake up, a small escalating complaint. 3 notes like someone clearing their throat before a speech. I've started waking up 15 seconds before she cries. Daniel thinks this is witchcraft. I think it's just listening. My ribs healed. The cast came off in April. I still feel the T6 compression when the weather changes, which Dr. Kapoor told me I might for the rest of my life, and which I have decided is acceptable. The trust has been moved into a separate account in my name. Attorney James Osei of Hendricks, Carr, and Osei, 41 years in estate law, careful and precise and exactly what Harold deserved, walked me through every page of it over 3 meetings in March. The documentation was ironclad. Ruth had thought of everything. My father called once, in February. His voice was quiet. He said he didn't know about the $40,000. I believe him. He said he wanted to see Nora. We're still working through what that looks like. I haven't heard from my mother. I haven't heard from Megan. Carol sent a single text, 2 weeks after Sunday dinner, that just said I'm sorry. 2 words. I read them for a long time. I haven't responded yet. I might. I haven't decided. Harold comes on Thursdays. He sits in the good chair by the window and holds Nora against his chest and tells her things I can't quite hear. His voice drops when he talks to her, lower than his regular voice, like he's saying things that are only for her. Last Thursday, I brought him coffee and stood in the doorway and watched them for a moment. He looked up. His eyes were bright. She has Ruth's hands, he said. I looked at Nora's fist curled against his shirt. I didn't say anything. I just nodded and left them to it.